Enter the Gungeon was an indie game made by the developers Dodgeroll in 2016. Aside from a well-received free game, it was their first commercial success. After continuously supporting the game and finally ending it with a Farewell to Arms update, they then released a sequel, Exit the Gungeon, in 2019. In this video, I want to compare the two titles, because I feel that there is a fundamental difference between the two games that makes Exit the Gungeon an inferior game in almost every way. In this video, I want to briefly review both games, then go on about how and why Exit the Gungeon can't compare to the original, despite both still being good products. This video is not meant to tear down the sequel, but instead just find the little things that's wrong with it, so it can become clear how it needs to improve in the updates that are likely to come. In Enter the Gungeon, you play as one of the 4 Gungeoneers available at the start, and go down into the Gungeon. You find yourself in a top-down bullet hell roguelike. Items are split up into 3 categories: active items, passive items, and guns, each quite self-explanatory. The game has numerous mechanics that slowly improve or unlock new things as you play, such as new items or guns to find in the next run, or to meet new NPCs who can help you on your way. Since they updated the game significantly since release, the amount of content is staggering to say the least. According to HowLongToBeat.com, to 100% complete Enter the Gungeon, it takes around 150 hours. Though if I'm honest, I've got that many hours in the game, and I'm still a ways away from 100%. I believe the most appealing aspect of the game, however, is its loving references and nods to video games. Rarely is it ever too obvious, or at least in your face about it. A lot of the time, a reference feels very forced, but here, it's like a loving little Easter egg that fans recognize, and those who don't wouldn't bat an eye. Guns and items referencing things like Doom 3 and Nyan Cat, the NES Zapper, Twitch streamers, Ghostbusters, Ratchet & Clank, Bloodborne, and even the cult classic Arachnophobia, released in 1990, beloved by all. It's genuinely really interesting to read through all the weird bits of pop culture, popular or not, that are referenced in this game. The game has a genuine heart in it, between the atrocious gun puns or the adorable animation. While people may pick it up for its difficult bullet hell roguelike gameplay, you stay for the creativity and the passion the game shows. Exit the Gungeon has the same basic blueprint, with a few notable differences to shake up the experience. For one, the game's a 2D side-scroller rather than a top-down shooter, so the added level of verticality allows for different player movement and different bullet hell enemies. Rather than running through random rooms trying to find the boss, you're trapped in an elevator with randomly spawning enemies, with a break to visit the shop in between each. You then go through 2 more elevators and then fight the final boss. The elevators themselves change depending on what character you are, since they can range between you running along some sort of side-scrolling level or an elevator with 2 buttons that you can press to dodge oncoming spikes. This is where a majority of the variety between runs takes place. Then all of the mainstays from the last game are still here, such as numerous NPCs, buying the new guns and items to find in later runs, all that kind of thing. However, the largest difference between the games is the gun system. In Enter the Gungeon, you would find guns with limited ammo, and you'd have your starting gun with infinite ammo. However, in this one, you've only got 1 gun, and it switches every dozen or so seconds. This was a type of challenge run called a blessing in the previous game, but it takes center stage in this one. The system is well adapted, and some of the guns have been tweaked to work better in the style. There was also another optional original mode added in the most recent update. It has the same style as the last game, but instead of an infinite ammo starting weapon, you have the Bless gun. So it allows you to gain multiple guns, while still holding onto your changing gun, which doesn't really fit together. The gameplay is still fairly tight, but has one notable flaw. Since you're invincible when you're in the air, rather than tight bullet hell mechanics, to dodge bullets, you just have to jump. Then sometimes bullets just fill the entire screen. It's pretty much just a roll of the dice whether you take damage during the second you touch the floor or not. Other than that, the gameplay and enemies are still fairly satisfying. Unfortunately, a lot of the creativity shown in the last title just really doesn't show up here. Since there isn't a single new gun, and only a handful of new items, it feels a little bit like a rehash. The most long-term problem with Exit the Gungeon is that the experience is exponentially shorter, taking from 20 to 25 hours to fully complete the game, which I am just a few items away from. I do think it's important to mention that this game was never meant to be the same size as Enter the Gungeon. It was actually originally released for the Apple Arcade, only being ported to PC and Switch the next year, and it only costs half as much as the original. Now, the crux of this video is discussing one specific thing that encapsulates everything great about Enter the Gungeon and everything wrong with Exit the Gungeon, no matter how much I love them both. Enter the Gungeon succeeds at being a roguelike, while Exit the Gungeon fails at it. In Enter the Gungeon, not only does every character have a separate set of items, starting gun, and final boss, but the sheer amount of variety between runs is staggering. with nearly 300 items, 4 different extra modes, numerous NPCs, secret floors, and much more. Rarely is each run even close to being similar. The game is a masterclass of variety, and creates a healthy mix of RNG and skill. The item drops and rooms you encounter are completely up to chance, but the second-to-second gameplay is incredibly skill-based, as the bullet hell genre typically is. The game is difficult, but it never cheats you out of damage. If you're hurt, it always feels deserved. With many varied and interesting bosses, and a difficulty that challenges you at every turn, the game is an incredible roguelike. Then when we look at Enter the Gungeon, it falls face first in this regard. Not only is the second-to-second gameplay much more repetitive, since the stage stays the same rather than these varied and interesting rooms, in Enter the Gungeon, each room was shaped in a specific way, and paired with enemies and specific spawns that can make use of the environment, making incredibly engaging gunfights. In Enter the Gungeon, while the elevators have these nifty little quirks, the environment stays the same for each elevator, with one exception being the side-scroller, which spawns new obstacles as you go. I would say the main problem with the gunplay is just the random enemy spawn. Just by shooting up or down with the numerous homing weapons available, the enemies will pose you no threat. The random spawns lack the quality of the plane spawns in the previous title. The next problem comes in the form of the guns themselves. Not only does this title have less than half the number of guns, but because of how the guns switch every 10 seconds, you never really familiarize yourself with them. In the original, it was always fun to delegate which weapons you had to use in the rooms, which you would save for the bosses, switch to what to fit the situation, try and manage your ammo, and all this other kinds of interesting things. But in this title, all that nuance is removed, so there's nothing you can do except just move the stick to face the enemy. It makes the second-to-second gameplay feel just so much more empty. While still solid, the primary gameplay loop is weaker than the last game. This is not something because of its lesser content, or it just being a spin-off, it's the base gameplay that is weaker. So yes, Enter the Gungeon is a worse game than Enter the Gungeon, but I don't want you leaving this video thinking that it's a bad one. It's still a great game. It's more of the thing you'd like if you like the original, and it's still a solid roguelike. The reason I wanted to make this video was because while I was playing Enter the Gungeon, something just felt off. I wanted to organize my thoughts and share them. My point was to explore why Enter the Gungeon feels off to the original and how it can improve, not why it's a bad game. I'm excited to see what comes next from this developer, and I hope that rather than just wallowing in the success of Enter the Gungeon, they channel their undeniable creativity and talent towards something new and exciting. Thanks for watching.